Mesha Rabbeinu, Hayei Mola Yom Yishnesei, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Malay Yemei Meshaseim Shal Tzadikim Meyei Meyei Mechedesh Shal Chedesh, that Tzadikim live full years. And the only Rebbe Nasi B'Yisrael by Chabad, who B'Pashtus and Begilui passed away on his birthday, was Nistalik on his birthday, was the Mitteler Rebbe. The Rebbe always says that any tzaddik, like Rashi, like other Gedolei Yisrael, where we only know one date, either the birthday or the Histalkus, and we don't know both, we could assume the Pashtus that they passed away on their birthday because of this klal that the Gemara says that by tzadikim HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Malay Meim Shazayim Tzadikim Meyem Meyem Chedesh LaChedesh. And of course, the following day, that means tomorrow, Yud Kislev, is the Chag HaGeula of the Mitteler Rebbe. We now know that the Geula of the Mitteler Rebbe took place. We now know, as a matter of fact, not 1 year before his Histalkus, but 2 years before his Histalkus. The Rebbe in his Rishimis calculates the calendar, and it turns out that both years, Tafresh Pei Vav and Tafkuf Pei Vav and Tafkuf Pei Zayin, which is the year before and the year before that of the Histalkus of the Mitteler Rebbe, Yud Kislev was Sunday, and Tes Kislev was Shabbos. He worked there 2 years in succession. It was the same Kviyas of the Yemei HaShavua. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, we don't know. And the Rabbeim always were inclined to say there was 1 year before the Histalkus. They found Pasha documents. And we now know there was 2 years before the Mitteler Rebbe's Histalkus that was released from prison. And it became a Chag HaGeula. It never achieved the status of Yutas Kislev because there was not a Geula Shlema. The Mitteler Rebbe's Geula ended because he passed away. That's the fact. The Russian government, who officially honored the Rebbe as an honorary citizen, the Frierdiker Rebbe told the Rebbe, it's printed in the Rishimis, he says, even though the Rabbeim were Ezrachim Nechbadim L'Reisayim, they were honorary citizens who had a special notice from the king of Russia himself, the Tsar, they never felt safe. The Frierdiker Rebbe told the Rebbe, they never felt safe. They always felt watched and intimidated and at risk, threatened. The Rabbeim specifically. So even though officially, Lefanim, they were these honorary citizens with all this covet and so forth, the reality was very different. And they really, really meddled. The story of the Mitteler Rebbe's arrest and liberation has to do with money and so-called improprieties. Right? The government was saying that the Mitteler Rebbe's handling of money was not as it should be, and they wanted to impose permanent audit on him. They wanted to control his expenditures. They wanted to control how much money he could raise and what the money went to, and so forth and so on. And it was an invasion, a very, very personal invasion of the Mitteler Rebbe's space, which was very, very disturbing to him. The Mitteler Rebbe actually once said, that when Avraham Avinu was made the father of the Jewish nation, at the covenant between the parts of the Bis Ben Absarim, the Rebbe gave him two breides. The Rebbe gave him two choices: Galus or Gehenim, Galus or Misa, exile or death. He says that my father chose Galus. Upon him is famir geblieben dem anderen breide. Evidently, the Mitteler Rebbe said, for me was left the second choice. The Mitteler Rebbe, although he was released from prison and allowed to go home to Lubavitch 2 whole years before his Histalkus, it really was not a Geula Shlema. They let him go, but they were breathing on his neck, and he couldn't function as a Rebbe. He could not function as a Rebbe. When the Tzemach Tzedek became a Rebbe, it was under the watchful eye of the Russian government, and the Tzemach Tzedek initially stopped certain traditions that Hasidim had. He pulled back on a lot of beautiful traditions that the Mitteler Rebbe had established about the grandeur of Hasidus Chabad, the beauty, the music and the dance, and other things. The fanem, the Bar Mitteler Rebbe was Teufes HaMakom Choshev. The Tzemach Tzedek stopped these things officially. The Yechidus Tanz was stopped because they didn't need the Russian government getting too paranoid, feeling that Lubavitch is too powerful and too effective as an organization and as a movement. And he pulled back. It was a very, very big unpleasantness, and it was never really replaced. I mean, the Mitteler Rebbe, in a certain way, Chabad Hasidus peaked by the Mitteler Rebbe. In another way, the Chabad Hasidus peaked by the Tzemach Tzedek in terms of the numbers of people and the Ashpah. And Tzemach Tzedek was literally the Rebbe of the whole Russia. There's no question about it. But in terms of the culture, I hate to use that word, but it's the right word. The culture of Chabad Hasidus, which included many facets, not only the Seichel, but the Aveda Shebelev and the Negine, the music, and the song, and the dance, it peaked by the Mitteler Rebbe, and it was stopped by design. It didn't stop by default, it stopped by design. The Tzedek stopped these things because he didn't want the pressure that was they were literally breathing down the back, breathing down the throat of the Mitteler Rebbe, and it really didn't end. The historicus of the Mitteler Rebbe is what closed his file, as it were. But in any case, so these days, today and tomorrow, are auspicious days connected specifically to the Mitteler Rebbe. The Rebbe once explained that when we sit on these days and we fabreng, we're not fabrenging for the Mitteler Rebbe. We're fabrenging for the Mitteler Rebbe as he is in the Rebbe. Every Rebbe, every Nasi, is Mamalik Kol Mokam Avesa, fills up the whole space of his predecessors. So every Rebbe, every Nasi has all the milas of all the Rebbeim that came before, plus his own Heisafa. So our loyalty is to the Rebbe, not to the Mitteler Rebbe. And we fabreng on the Mitteler Rebbe's Chag HaGeula and Yom Holedes and Yom Mistalchus, in as much as the Mitteler Rebbe is a part of the Hashpah to us of the Rebbe's Aguzans and of our Rebbe, of our Nasi. So this is what Tes and Yud Kislev are. One more little detail, and that is,
we say Tachnun?
Today we say Tachnun, and I'm not sure why. Tomorrow we do not say Tachnun. Unfortunately, today's Monday and tomorrow's Tuesday. It would have been nice, it would have been backwards, but that's the way that's the way the breaks fall. The Chag HaGeula Mitteler Rebbe is one day, Yud Kislev. Although it's brought down, the Rebbe said it by Fabrengen also, that year, the Mitteler Rebbe was released from prison, Tes Kislev was Shabbos. And Yud Kislev was Sunday. And it was late Shabbos afternoon, it was a short Shabbos, it was winter. And the Mitteler Rebbe said Chassidus, Kedakia B'Kodesh. And while he was in jail, he was entitled, he wasn't really in jail, he was under a house arrest. He was entitled to have a minyan 3 times a day, and he was entitled to say Chassidus 3 times a week, with 50 Chassidim, or 3 times 50 Chassidim, whatever the numbers were. But he was saying Chassidus, and there were quite a few Chassidim who had permission to come and hear him say Chassidus. On the pasuk from the Siddur, Ata Echad V'Shimcha Echad, Umi Chamcha Ki Yisrael Goy Echad Bara. So we say Shabbos to Mincha. And as he was speaking, they came in to tell him that he's free to go. But they did not want to disturb him, because he was in the middle of saying Chassidus, so they waited. By the time he finished saying Chassidus, Shabbos had already gone out, and it was already Matzah Shabbos. And he was informed that he's free on Yud Kislev. So in fact, if you think about it, Tes Kislev and Yud Kislev are both Yemei Geula. Just like by the Friedrich Rebbe based in Gimel Tammuz, he was told unofficially on Beis Tammuz, and then officially again on your Gimel Tammuz, etc. But the fact is, Mepnei Sibis Sheinis, I don't know why, we do say Tachnun and Tes Kislev, Azefit Mazach. It's not considered a Chag HaGeula, although it's connected to the Gula of the Mitteler Rebbe. Yud Kislev is the Chag HaGeula. Now the Mai says Azeh. We've had Fabrengens, Yud Kislev, and Tes Kislev since Tov Shin Nun Hey. When we started this Yurim, I would say within a week of Gimel Tammuz. I'm talking about me. I'm a very selfish person. We started right after Gimel Tammuz. But right after Gimel Tammuz. Maybe days. Could even be. I'm talking about me. No. You asked me a few times. Fine. Beis Abchira was Nun Gimel, Nun Beis, and Nun Alf, and I also went Chof Ches Sivan Tafshin Adal. We went to the hospital. I spoke mamish 5 days before Gimel Tammuz for the ladies in Manhattan. You may remember. I can't forget. But we started the shiurim almost within days after Gimel Tammuz. We had these classes, maybe after Shiva, but we started right away. We've been learning with Eibish's help and Ariel's Mesiras Nefesh. That's a decade of Maisa. 15 Yonah Hanan. Now it's Tov Shin Samach Ches. So this is our 13th or 14th year. I don't know how to count. We're learning a long time, kind of how. And every year we have Tes Kislev and Yud Kislev. We have Fabrengens, and I tell you the same stories or different stories. In the last few years, I've been bringing in Hagdama to Derech Chaim. I brought in 1 year. A letter from the Mitteler Rebbe, I believe I brought in last year. We do different things to make it interesting. It shouldn't be the same Teres Nachamol. I mean, kind of harder. There's a lot of new faces, but there are people here who've been here since the beginning, or at least for many, many years. So for this year, I chose this letter. It's a well-known letter. It's very, very well-known. It's a letter from the Friedrich Rebbe. The content of this letter is that the Friedrich Rebbe is telling stories about the Mitteler Rebbe. And I figured that Lekovid, the Mitteler Rebbe's Yom Holedes and Yom Mistalchus Yelula, and also Chag HaGeula will spend today and tomorrow reading these 2 stories, and Kamuvan V'gam Pashat, a story from any Rebbe, any Nasi B'Yisrael, not just a Sheina Maise, it's a Sipur Teichni, the story tells something. I just want to say one more thing, which I meant to say before and I forgot. That is, the Mitteler Rebbe passed away on his birthday. And it's based on the Gemara. That the Gemara says that Tzadikim, Hashem makes their years perfect. But the kasha is, the obvious question is, for a person's years to be perfect, they shouldn't pass away on their birthday. They should pass away one day before. Because the birthday is already the next year. In other words, the Mitteler Rebbe didn't pass away at 54. The Mitteler Rebbe passed away in the beginning of his 55th year. Nevertheless, it's called Yomim and Shanim Shleimim. So the Rebbe explained it many times. The Nekudas Abiyah, the basic point is that Ein Shilta B'Yem HaMavos. It's a pasuk. Le'uchalei Latzes V'Laveit is a chumash. The day a person passes away is not a day of his life. It's the day of passing away. The day of histalkos is not a day. Because days, it says in Zayar, Kol Yoma V'Yoma Avodah Avidete. Every job has its own personal avodah. And as the Zayar says, the Lashon Chasa Yema Chada Chasa Lavusha Chada. You have to fill every single day. If you waste one day, the day is lost. And if tomorrow or next week you'll do double or triple, so you can make up for lost inyanim, opportunities, but the time is ava yeme batal karbone. You know, the uvas leuchal sakin. You lost that time because one of the criteria of Yiddishkeit is baba yamim, not just to bring along your achievements, but to bring along your days. And every day has avad avidity, has the avad of that day. And of course, some days are harder than others. Some days, like a day after Simchas Torah or a day after a wedding. So it's like sort of, it's lazy day, like you have in camp. In Yiddishkeit, there's no such thing as lazy day. Kol yema v'yema avad avidete. Every day has its function and its job and its avad and its achrayis. And you're not allowed to let days fall into one another. And by tzaddikim, by the Rebbeim, by the Nasi Yisrael, this was a very, very real thing. Days were entities. But on the day that a person is nostalgic, that's not a day in terms of an avodah pratis. That is, in effect, the Shabbos of a lifetime. Just like Shabbos is the culmination of a week, and Yom Kippur is the culmination of a year, and Yovel, the Jubilee, is the culmination of 50 years, the day a person passes away is the culmination of a life. And the day a person passes away in the hours before his histalkos, that's not a day. That day is not one of the days of his life. That's a culmination, that's a Shabbos, that's an aliyah of Kol Yemei Chayav. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu said, I can't do anything today. Rashi says, Nistu Imenu Sharei Chochma, there's different Pirushim in Rashi. And one of the things that Rashi brings is, today I'm passing away, Ein Shiltei B'Yayim HaMavos, I'm not in charge. Today is a day for aliyah. Not a day for Hamshacha, and not a day for Avodah, today is a day for ascent. And this is how it is. On the day a person passes away, the neshama has an aliyah. In other words, it's a day of culmination, of ending a life, and completing a life, and bringing wholeness to a life. It's not just an ordinary day. So therefore, a person's life actually ends the day before. Because the day of their passing is not one of the days of their lives. This is the aliyah, this is the end of the whole life. And that's why a yahrzeit is such an extraordinary event. Because a yahrzeit commemorates a day that culminates a lifetime. It's not a technicality. A person died, so we commemorate that day, that yahrzeit, that anniversary. It's the pshat, that day, a whole life ascended, an entire life was lifted up. Each year on that anniversary, it's the commemoration, the marking of a yahrzeit marks the aliyah of the whole life of that person. Because just like, on Rosh Hashanah we say you have a microcosm of the whole year in anticipation, on a yahrzeit you have a microcosm of a whole lifetime in conclusion and in summary and in sachakel and in aliyah. And like the Rebbe always brings in the Maimarim and the Sichos from the Alter Rebbe and Tanya, Pe'el Yeshuis B'Kerev Ha'aretz. It's Eila L'mayla Taka, it ascends on high, but the effect that it has on this earth is Yatam B'Chayohi is even more than in his lifetime. Like we all know the Chasidus and so forth and so on. So without any further ado, let's read this again, Sakedish from Mitteler Rebbe, where he relates two stories from the Mitteler Rebbe. And understandably, we're going to make it not just tell stories, read and translate, because most people here can read Hebrew. But we'll make it useful. Okay. So there's a letter from Mitteler Rebbe, as I mentioned, which was written in conjunction with a Maamar that's published from Tzadik Beis, I believe, Tzadik Hey. That's called the Vruach Hamoshel. It's a famous Maamar. It's a very famous Maamar, in fact. B'maynal mechtavcha. It's written le'echad mechasonav harabanim shlita. That's the Rebbe. Echad mechasonav, one of his son-in-laws, harabanim shlita. That's the Rebbe. No, Shechianu. So what's new? B'maynal mechtavcha. In response to your letter. Hashayel V'Deidish, that's asking, V'Deidish, and is seeking clarity. Al Devar regarding Ma'isa Hayadua in quotations, the well-known story Sheniskir B'Drush, which is mentioned in the Maamar Vruach Hamoshel Ta'ala Alecha. The Maamar of Friedrich Rebbe. I think the Maamar talks about Hashgacha Pratis, but I could be wrong. The Indian regarding the idea Masha Gedel Hadeir, that the greater, the Rebbe, the Nesiya Yisrael, the heads of the generation, Nitfas Ba'avein Hadeir, is caught up in the sins of the generation. Hainu, in other words, so the Gemara says this, that Gedeli Hadeir and Nitfas Ba'avein Hadeir, the greatest leaders of the Jewish generation, of each Jewish generation, are caught up in the sins of the generation. When the Eibishter punishes the Jews, he punishes the Tzaddikim also. And perhaps he punishes the Tzaddikim even more. Although Tzaddikim carry no liability. The Tzaddikim Gemurim, and they may even have made a machoah. In other words, it's not like they're being punished because somehow they have some kind of an infraction. It's the pshat that the Eibishter made, the Tzaddikim Yisrael, the Jewish holy men, are connected inexorably to their flock, to their sheep. And even if they have zero life, they did nothing wrong, the sins of the people affect them because there's an interconnectedness. There's a hiskashrus, as we learned in the Yem classes of recently, between the Rebbe and the Chassidim and the Rebbe. So tzaddikim sometimes are caught up in the sins of the generation, well, they have nothing to do with it. But in this is the Lashon HaGemara, that Gedeli Hadeir, Nitfasim Ba'avein Hadeir. But the previous Rebbe translated it a little bit differently. The previous translated it as follows. He said, Hainu, this means, Masha Gedeli Hadeir, that the greatest leaders of a particular generation, moitzim ba'atzmam bedakos dedakos, find in themselves, in the finest of finest levels, chedeiram, the sins of their generation. This is what the Friedrich Rebbe said in the Maamar. Not the pshat gedeli aden itfasim ba'avein ader, that they're being punished for the sins of the people just because they're the head of that generation. But when they hear about the sins of that generation, they say that sin must exist in me bedakos. That sin must be in me someplace on the finest and most theoretical levels, which is why it manifests in the generation. In other words, if I didn't have this on the eighth level, then my generation would not have it on the grossest level. So the Friedrich Rebbe gives a different taich to this Maamar Chazal than is the classic taich. He says the pshat gedela then in fasim ba'avein hadeir, that when a Rebbe Nasi Tzaddik sees in his flock a sin, he asks himself, where is the root of that sin in me? So the Mitteler Rebbe mentioned it, and in the scheme of mentioning it, he says the Lashon Kemaisa Hayadua, the well-known story. So the Rebbe's Lagazun, and our Rebbe asks his father-in-law, the Rebbe did not say the Friedrich Rebbe, what's the story? So the Friedrich Rebbe now tells him the story. There are many stories about this issue. There are two stories which I have through an oral transmission. Ish mipi ish, a person from a person. All the way back to people who were present when the following events occurred. The first story is Miheid Kvei Kedushas Azmor Admor HaMtzai. It's from my Elta Zayde, is this, the Mitteler Rebbe. V'sipur Sheni, and the second story, Miheid Kvei Kedushas Azmor Admor Baal Tzemach Tzedek, the Tzuk Land of Gamziyah. From my great-grandfather, the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, is now telling the story, both of these, our Rebbe, the two stories. Now I want you to know that there's a letter from the Rebbe to Friedrich Rebbe, to his father-in-law. It's very interessante brief, where the Friedrich Rebbe wrote the Rebbe a letter. It's very interesting, it's very heartwarming. The Friedrich Rebbe wrote the Rebbe a letter, in which he explains to him a question that he had. So the Rebbe follows up the letter that the Friedrich Rebbe sent him with a counter letter. And he says to him that he thanks him from the bottom of his heart for the chinuch and the hadracha that the Rebbe, the Shved, the Friedrich Rebbe is giving him. He says, Chosali bazeh harbe. The Friedrich Rebbe writes about himself, I'm lacking in this an enormous amount. Especially vasarum chasidis, especially what's around chasidis. That means the stories. And then the Rebbe writes in Yiddish, ze unzer badait. What the stories mean. So he writes to Friedrich Rebbe, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your generosity, and I beg you to continue sending me more such letters with more such teichnis dekinyanim. It's a letter from my Eidim to Hashver, from my son-in-law to father-in-law. One happens to be a Rebbe, the other happens to be a Rebbe. So it's everything on Madrigas. But you see the Rebbe's appreciation of the Friedrich Rebbe's generosity in offering him this information. For those who do not know, the Rebbe had a policy, the Friedrich Rebbe had a policy when he lived in Latvia and Poland. the way the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote letters, Frierdiker Rebbe was a writer. The Rebbe was a speaker. The Rebbe had a hard time writing. The Frierdiker Rebbe was a writer and a hard time speaking. It was interesting. The Rogatchover was the same way. So the Rogatchover wrote very bekitzer tamtizdik, but when he spoke, he was so easy to listen to. He was very elaborate, very generous, like the Rebbe. So there was a policy, so the way the Frierdiker Rebbe operated was, he had notebooks. Notebooks, they were numbered. When he had to do his correspondence, he would write his letters in his own pen in the notebooks. So if he had to send 20 letters, he would write the 20 letters in the notebooks. The secretaries would type the letter from the written notes, and you could see the notebook. We have copies, we have these notebooks in the library. They weren't written neatly at all. They were written very quickly. And the Frierdiker Rebbe had a gorgeous handwriting. When he wrote in his own notes, he wrote very, very quickly. It probably was mamish, exceedingly quickly. And then the maskidim, the secretaries, Chaim Lieberman and whoever else, knew the Rebbe's ksav, and they would type it up, and then the Rebbe would magia. But that meant that the Rebbe kept the original himself. He used to actually write the letters in a notebook, and then the maskidim would copy. So there was a policy in the Rebbe's house that all the secretaries of the Rebbe knew that every letter that was called a michtav toichni, any letter that had substance beyond immediate needs, like community affairs or personal questions, one copy had to be sent to Berlin or Paris. The Frierdiker Rebbe had a policy to the effect that any letter which he wrote that had a part of it that was possibly negel, that had been probably useful for the community, in other words, letters with Chassidische Teuchen or Hoira and Avoida and Hadracha and also in Haskanos to Buddhists, a copy was sent to the Rebbe's Zogazan. And the Rebbe amassed 2,000 letters, which he carried him with Mesiras Nefesh to New York. The Rebbe made an index of these letters, which are published. The indices are published in the bottom of the Igros Kodesh themselves. Those 2,000 letters were the basis of the Igros Kodesh of the Frierdiker Rebbe that came out in the early 80s. It was the Rebbe's own private collection, because the Frierdiker Rebbe had this policy of sending the Rebbe a copy of the letter. Once the Rebbe was in New York, this policy was interrupted because the Rebbe was together with the Frierdiker Rebbe. He didn't need to be given a copy of the letter. He had access to the archives itself. So when the letters were published in Igros Kodesh, they were published from the Frierdiker Rebbe's brief, which is a story unto itself. But this was the idea. The Rebbe used to get a copy of each letter, and to the Rebbe, it wasn't only that he was the Frierdiker Rebbe's archivist. He was collecting these letters for possible publication. And in Europe, they published two Kuntreisen. One was the Kuntres Namidas Tilim, and the second was the Kuntres, I forget what it was about. But the Rebbe published these. Officially it's called Veistach, the Igor Talmidei Atmimim. And if you look in the back of the Tilim, the Kuntres of Amidas Tilim, which is called Kevetz Aleph, was officially published. The Rebbe made it. It was called Igor Talmidei Atmimim, but the Rebbe prepared it, and the Rebbe selected the letters, the Rebbe published the letters, and so forth and so on. And the Rebbe was also in charge of the Hatamim. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote his daughter to the Rebbe, to Chaya Mushke. He says, offiziell seien da andere Redakteur, aber der Werk ist im Ganzen seine. Sehr a choshever junger Mann. The Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbe about her husband, about the Rebbe. He says, officially there were other editors of the Hatamim, but you should know that the Werk, real Yiddish, the work of the Hatamim is all his, the Rebbe, side the Niglin, side the Chassidus, side the Mechtavim. Sehr a geherrlicher junger Mann. He uses a Yiddish word that nobody uses. A very, very honorable young man. The Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbetzin about her husband, about the Rebbe. But in any case, the Rebbe got such chayes from these letters. The Rebbe was also, besides being a Rebbe, first a Chassidish Yid. The Rebbe was a Chassidish Yid, and Mele, he loved these letters. So let's read. Aleph. Ba'achas minis Yesav shel hed Kedushas Admor hoem tzoi. On one occasion, when the Mitteler Rebbe traveled, he stopped in a motel near the city of Smargon. It was in the month of Av, which I guess for us would be August. The air was good, it wasn't too hot and it wasn't too humid. And nor wasn't it too cool, of course, and wet. So the Mitteler Rebbe decided to spend about a week there. When Hasidim discovered that the Mitteler Rebbe intends to spend a week in this place, so naturally Niskabe it's called Rav. A large community of Hasidim gathered, lekabel pnei koche, to receive the holy contents of the Heilige Rebbe, vayam kablam b'yechidus kanahol, and he greeted them, he received them in yechidus as was the custom. Now, when the Mitteler Rebbe would travel, there was always an entourage that traveled with him, a handful of the greatest Hasidim, to accompany him on his journey. You know, the Rabbeim, when they traveled, sometimes would take a whole minyan with them, in case there'd be a place where they couldn't find Jews. And the Hasidim were thrilled for the schus to travel with the Rebbe and to see the Rebbe in a much more intimate setting outside of Lubavitch, where there were less people and less tumult and so forth. So the Mitteler Rebbe always traveled with an entourage. This was the case also on this journey, that the Mitteler Rebbe traveled along with an entourage of Hasidim. One day, in the middle of the day, hundreds of men stood tzafuf, pressed against one another, waiting to be accepted by the Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe, for Yechidus. Suddenly, Tziva Admor, the Mitteler Rebbe, instructed Lizgoyra Delas, to close the door. Upasek Melakabel, as Ha'archem, he interrupted from accepting the guests. HaChasidim, Ha'imdim B'chotzer, U'mechakem Lihikanis, Liyechidus. The Chasidim waiting in the yard who were anticipating to go into the Rebbe to Yechidus. V'chein HaChasidim Ha'iskim B'chazar Sadrusha, as well as the Chasidim who was busy business it was to repeat the Maimorim. Parenthesis. Kain Haya Seide B'chol HaNasiyas, this was the custom by all the Mitteler Rebbe's trips. Any person who wanted to go into the Rebbe to Yechidus, or the Mitteler Rebbe, whether he was a Talmud Chacham or a Pashta Yid, he was not allowed into Yechidus until he would not hear twice or three times Chazar of the Maimer Shadarash Kveit Kedushas the Mitteler Rebbe Chazar. By the Mitteler Rebbe, I'll talk about this more tomorrow. Chassidus was the beginning of everything, and Chassidus was the end of everything, and Chassidus was the middle of everything. Chabad Chassidus. And if a Chassid wanted Yechidus, he had to first warm himself up with the Chassidus. So you had the Chassidim waiting to go into Yechidus. You had the Chassidim who were busy learning Chassidus and hearing Chazara from Maimorim to prepare themselves and so forth. Kulam Chashvu, it was self-understood, Asher Betach, that certainly Kvei Kedushas Admor, that the Mitteler Rebbe is Ayef. He's exhausted, Meribe Anachnasa, from the number of guests. V'lachein hifzik l'shah, he therefore stopped for an hour or two, Kabbalah Sarchem, receiving the guests, B'chtei lihi nafesh, to rest, to l'hachlav keich, and to renew his strength. However, a little while later, the Gabbai comes out, and he tells the Hasidim he doesn't know what's going on, but the Mitteler Rebbe is very forbidden, very, very bitter. Something is really disturbing him. And we'll continue tomorrow.